Well, God bless you. Welcome to our channel. I believe God brought you here today because God has a word for you. You're not here by mistake. You're here by the divine providence of God because God brought you here because God has a message that will change your life. So right now, open your ears, open your mind, open your heart, and receive this wonderful word from God. Amen. You know, this week we're wrapping up our Get In Shape sermon series. As I told you at the beginning of this series, I believe that God is using this Lenten period to get us in the best shape of our lives so we can do the biggest things that God has called us to. As we get in shape, we're not just talking about our physical shape. We're talking about our spiritual shape, our emotional shape, our psychological shape, our shape on the inside and our shape on the outside. So we've been preaching for weeks on getting in shape. And you know, we start off, shape's an acronym for us. We start off with the S in shape, which is simply your spiritual gifts. God has gifted each and every one of us with some things spiritually that allow us to move, that allow us to function, that allow us to do the things that God would have us to do. We didn't have to earn them, we were gifted with them. But also then we moved into the H, the heart. God needs our heart to be right. Our heart has to be in the right place because everything that we do flows from our heart. Our heart has to be filled with the right things so we're not putting junk out into the world. If we have clean hearts that are aligned with God, we'll be able to do clean things that are aligned with God. But then we moved into the A. Our abilities. Our abilities and our spiritual gifts are not the same things. There are some things you're just naturally gifted to do. God has given you abilities for what God has for you to do. Never look down on your abilities. Here's the thing. What you're able to do and what somebody else is able to do comes together to be the tapestry of what God has for all of us to do. So we've got our spiritual gifts. Our hearts are in the right place. God's given us abilities. And last week we talked about personalities. Listen, all of us are different. All of us are wired differently. All of us see the world differently. And God has given all of us personalities that work for what God has assigned us to. That's why last week's sermon was called Built for This. We were built for what God is calling us to. Built for what God has for us to do. And built from the inside purposefully and full of purpose so we can do what God would have us to do. And this week we round out with the E in shape. And that E stands for experiences. I want you to know, part of who you are the things that you've been through. Part of who you are the experiences you've had in life. And today, I just want to preach from the topic, better because of it. Better because of it. Author B.J. Neblett simply said this: we are the sum total of our experiences. Those experiences, be they positive or negative, make us the person we are at any given point in our lives. And like a flowing river, those same experiences and those experiences that are yet to come continue to influence and reshape the person that we are and the person we become. None of us are the same as we were yesterday, nor will we be the same tomorrow. All of us have had experiences. The very fact that you're here right now, the very fact that you're breathing and watching this broadcast, the very fact that you're here, whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it later on YouTube, you've gone through some stuff. You've experienced some things. You've experienced good and bad, and it's shaped who you are. If we're completely honest, we are the sum total of our experience. How we see the world is often dictated by the things that we've gone through. And some of the stuff we've gone through has been great. It's been mountaintop experiences. And some of the stuff that we've gone through has been terrible. They've been valley experiences. And what I want you to know is that every experience that you've had has had an impact on you, and you've got to know what you're doing with your experiences. Because here's the thing. We all love the mountaintop stuff. But can we be completely honest? It's the valley stuff where we've learned some of our most critical lessons. It's the valley stuff where we've gone through some stuff, and looking back, we figured out that God was doing something even in the valley. And what I want you to understand is that sometimes it's those valley moments that you got to thank God for. I know somebody is saying, I don't want to thank God for that. But I want you to know those valley moments that you experience let you realize that you've survived some stuff. Those valley moments that you've experienced let you know that you're stronger than you thought you were. Those valley moments that you've experienced have let you know that you're smarter, quicker, and you can get through some things that you never thought you'd survive. But you don't know that until you experience it. The thing about the experiences in the valley is that those experiences can make us bitter or they can make us better. And I want you to understand, if you survive some stuff, that experience wasn't for nothing. I want to say it again. God does not waste our pain, God does not waste our problems, and God does not waste our problematic experiences. Those experiences were there to develop you. Those experiences were there to teach you. Those experiences were there so that you could learn some stuff that you would need to know later for what God is going to do in your life. And what you have to understand, I want to help somebody that has had a rough road. I want to help somebody that's had a rough season, that the experiences you went through were prerequisites for your destiny. Understand? Prerequisites are the things that you have to go through before you can get to the good stuff. Listen, when I was in school, I used to hate the prerequisite classes. You know, back in my day, and I know I'm dating myself with this, we had a course catalog, and yes, it was paper. We couldn't just go online, punch in courses and see what's going on. It was on paper. You had to flip through the book, find your class, find the course number, find the section number, and fill out, watch this, these little slips in triplicate. So you had to press down so there was a copy for you, a copy for the teacher, a copy for the registrar's office, and a copy for something else. I don't remember what it was, but it was 4 copies. And here's the thing. I used to get excited when I saw a class I wanted to take. I would want to take this class, or I would want to take that class, because it would have an interesting title and it would have a great description. And then I always found these words: prerequisites required. And it would give a list of classes that you had to take before you could get to the good stuff. It would start off with, you had to take intro to this. You had to take intermediate that, so that you would know these things before you got to the good stuff. And I want you to understand, some of the experiences that you had were the prerequisites, the requirements for where God is taking you right now. And here's the thing, nobody likes prerequisites. We want to get to the good stuff as quickly as possible. But watch this. It is your prerequisites that give you the requisite experience to thrive in the good stuff. I want you to write it down in the comments. I got prerequisites. You have to understand the prerequisites give you the experience to be able to tackle what's ahead of you. Too many times we want to start off at the top, not realizing that if you don't do the work to get there, you won't be able to survive there. And here's the problem. There is nothing worse than getting a glimpse of your destiny and then tumbling back down the mountain. There is nothing worse than getting to what God has promised and realizing that you're not ready for it because you skipped a bunch of steps. Experience is simply the practical knowledge, skill, or practice derived from the direct observation or participation of a thing. Experience is something we personally encountered, underwent, or lived through. I want you to understand, your experiences make you. They qualify you. And watch this. I know some of y'all are thinking, I'm overqualified. This is what I want you to understand. This is a word for somebody in a down season. You're not overqualified. You don't understand how big what God has is. When you feel like you're overqualified because you've been through too much, you feel like you're overqualified because you've been in the valley for too long, I want you to understand that God is not wasting your pain. God is not wasting your time. You need everything you're learning in those times for where God is going to take you. I want you to understand, the lower it goes, the higher God will take you. And what you got to understand is this: don't mess up the prerequisites. Pastor, what do you mean don't mess up the prerequisites? Here's the thing. Prerequisites can make you ready or give you resentment. Resentment is bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly. And you know folk who are resentful. Folk who just look back and say, I shouldn't have had to go through this. I shouldn't have had to deal with this. It's just not fair. Let me let you in on a secret. What you went through was preparation for where you're going. So you have to realize that while you think the experience isn't fair, neither is the favor on the other side of it. What you don't understand is that many times folks see people at the top of the mountain and see the favor that God has put on their life, but they don't realize the prerequisites that they had to go through. Because the same way you thought the prerequisites were unfair, somebody's going to look at the blessing and think that the favor is unfair. God is never going to be unfair. God will use what you've been through to take you where God has you going, but don't get resentful in the middle of it or you'll miss the blessing at the end of it. Here's the problem. Because God knows the end from the beginning. God understands both backwards and forwards. We only understand backwards while we're living forward. In other words, you're going to look back and realize what God was doing. You're going to look back and realize that you weren't being treated unfairly. You were being prepared for a blessing that you did not know about. You're going to look back and realize you weren't being treated out of kind. You weren't being treated out of tune. God was preparing you for where God was taking you. But you got to understand this. Unless you have context for what you're going through, you will always believe that you're going through too much. Here's the thing. I want you to have some context for what you're going through. I want you to have some context for what you've been through. To understand, sometimes you got to fast forward to the end to look back to understand the beginning. Here it is. Bible tells us of a man named Joseph. Joseph in the book of Genesis is the favorite son of Jacob. And here's what we have. In Genesis chapter 50, verses 15 through 21. You got to have the end to understand the beginning. Genesis 50, 15 through 21. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave us this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgressions of your brothers and their sins, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgressions of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. This is what I want you to understand. Joseph has gotten to this interesting place in life. He's gotten to a place where he is in charge of Egypt. He is second only to the Pharaoh of Egypt. And his brothers who did him dirty are scared that Joseph is going to seek revenge now. So they come up with this thing. Maybe if we tell him Daddy said forgive us, he'll let this ride. And look what Joseph did. Joseph says, don't be scared. I'm not God. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. I want you to understand, Joseph had been through enough that he could look back and not be bitter, but he could be better. Now, what did Joseph go through? You got to understand, Joseph went through a whole bunch, but Joseph's experiences are what made him able to be where he was at that moment. And I want somebody in here to understand, you've been looking at this the whole wrong way. You've been looking at this trying to think of how you're going to get back at folk when you finally come through. You've been looking at this trying to think about what you're going to do to the folk who did wrong by you. What if God was using them to prepare you for what God was trying to do with you? I want to show you something. Joseph's an interesting fellow. The Bible starts off telling us the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. Now, when we find Joseph in Genesis chapter 37, he's his father's favorite son. He's his father's favorite son, so much so that his father gives him what they call a coat of many colors. And Joseph is wearing this coat. He's all swagged out. Now, understand why the coat of many colors was an important thing to know back then. Back then, dye was expensive. So most clothes were, I would say white, but they were kind of dirty. So it was kind of off-white, gray, brownish, tan. So if you had something that had many colors, not a color, because one dye was expensive, he had a coat. To get to many, it's not one, it's not two, it's at least three, which means that it was a triple expensive coat. And his father gave it to him. And Joseph is walking around flossing and glossing. He's styling and profiling. And Joseph is walking around arrogantly explaining to his brothers and sisters the dreams that God has given him, where they are going to bow down to him one day. Even his mother and father are going to bow down to him one day. And I believe that Joseph was walking around arrogantly explaining to folk how great he was. And here's what happens. If you arrogantly explain how great you are, God will find a way to humble you. And this is what we find in chapter 37. Joseph's brothers get so sick of him that they throw him in a pit. They take his behind, throw him in a pit, take his coat of many colors, and tear it up. And it gets so bad, they leave him there to die. One of his brothers is like, no, we'll go back and get him. Here's the thing. They see some travelers coming by, and they sold their brother into slavery. This is what I want you to understand. In that pit, Joseph found the first thing he needed to get to where he was going. He found humility. Joseph found out in that pit that his coat didn't mean what he thought it meant. Joseph found out in that pit that you can't walk around all high and mighty all the time. In that pit, Joseph found the humility that pulled away his arrogance and allowed him to act like somebody who had some sense. Can I explain something to you? You cannot get to the blessings of God with a haughty and arrogant heart. You got to find some humility. And watch this. The problem with humility is that it usually takes a humbling experience to get you there. It's difficult to be humble and believe you're great at the same time. Joseph had to be humble. In the pit, he found the humility to back himself down from his dream and be able to live like a normal person. I can only imagine how he would have been if he had never been humbled. I can only imagine how he would have been if he had never been taken down a peg. We've all seen folk who were born on third base and think they hit a home run when they finally make it. They walk around arrogantly. They walk around narcissistically. They walk around acting like their stuff don't stink, and everybody sees it but them. God will use humbling experiences to give you the humility to stop acting a fool. He found humility in the pit. But here's the thing. Once he was sold, he was then resold. Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 39 that after the travelers get to Egypt, they sell him into slavery to a man named Potiphar. Now, Potiphar is the chief of Pharaoh's guards, and he makes Joseph a slave in his house. And here's the thing. Joseph, the Bible tells us that as Joseph is serving in Potiphar's house, that the favor of God is still with him. The Bible tells us that everything he did went well. He made things at Potiphar's house better, even though he was still enslaved. I want to help somebody. Something you've got to understand about God is even in your humbling experiences, even in times when you feel like you're a slave, God will still bless you to let you know that he's still real. Can anybody just write it down and say, he's still real? All of us have had experiences where we felt like we have been forsaken, felt like we have been left alone, felt like we have been taken for granted. And God showed up to show us that he can bless us in the worst of situations. Bless us in times when we feel forsaken. Bless us in times when we feel like all is lost. It's in Potiphar's house that Joseph begins to see, even in the worst of experiences, God is still real. Write it down in the comments. God is still real. When you're going through at your job, God is still real. When you're having trouble in your marriage, God is still real. When you're having issues in school, God is still real. And God will bless you in the midst of your problems. God will bless you in the midst of your circumstances. God will bless you in the midst of your issues. But he's blessing you to show you something. Here it is. Genesis 39, 6 through 10. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. I want to show you something. It was at Potiphar's house that Joseph learned integrity. I want you to understand, for where God is going to take you, God's got to know that he can trust you. Joseph had every reason to not have any integrity. Think about it. He's been thrown in a pit. He's been sold into slavery. He was a free man living as a slave. And Joseph looks around and says, "God has blessed me to the point that I'm number 2 in this man's house, and I can't betray that." Watch this. God is going to give you some experiences so that you can learn that you don't have to take shortcuts. You don't have to make compromises. You don't have to do things out of character. God will put you in experiences to show you that your integrity will bring you through. Write it down. I've got integrity. When you've got integrity, you realize that you can't betray God. When you've got integrity, you realize that you don't despitefully use people. When you've got integrity, you realize that you do the right thing even when you don't want to. When you've got integrity, you realize that everything that you do matters to God. And Joseph, while he was a slave in Potiphar's house, after being humble, he finds integrity. He doesn't find resentment. He doesn't say, "Well, I shouldn't be here anyway." He lives righteously, even in an unrighteous situation. I want to tell somebody right now, if you're going through an unrighteous situation, don't become what you're going through. Don't become what you're dealing with. Hold on to your integrity, because it may be all you have to get you out to the other side. Now, here's the problem. Integrity will sometimes cost. Bible tells us as we go further in the story that Joseph one day gets caught by himself with Potiphar's wife, and she rips his jacket off and then claims that he tried to force himself on her. And Potiphar throws Joseph in prison. He's been accused of something. He winds up in this predicament. And now he's in prison. And here's the thing. In prison, Joseph learned patience. Bible tells us that even in prison, Joseph was elevated. Can I tell you something? When it goes from bad to worse, God goes from strong to stronger. I want somebody to understand. There will be times when you're saying, it can't get any worse, and it seems like the bottom falls out. There will be times when you feel like it can't go down from here, and you will find yourself out of the frying pan and into the fire, and you will find out that the God that kept you in the frying pan will keep you in the fire. Joseph goes from being enslaved to being in prison, and watch this, in prison, he learns patience. I want you to understand, sometimes our experiences are more drawn out because God is trying to teach us patience. Everything happens directly on God's schedule. And too many times, we want it to happen on our schedule. And God is saying, until you can learn to abide by my timetable, I can't place you where you're supposed to be. I want somebody to understand, you're delaying your elevation because you have not learned patience. You're delaying what God is trying to do because you're still trying to fight your way through instead of realizing that God is doing everything on purpose and for a purpose. And here it is, Joseph gets left behind in the prison. What do I mean left behind? Genesis chapter 40, Bible tells us that these two guys are having dreams. One of them is the cupbearer to the king, the other one's a baker, and Joseph interprets their dreams for them. And when one of them gets out and goes back to the palace with Pharaoh. Joseph says, tell Pharaoh about me, get me out of here. That's chapter 40. Chapter 41 starts off with these words. 2 years later. Yeah. This man been gone 2 years. And Joseph's just been sitting in prison. But look what happens. Chapter 41, starting in verse 9. Then the chief cupbearer to Pharaoh said, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants and imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man interpretation of the dream. And things turned out exactly as how he interpreted to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph and quickly brought him from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Look at what happens. For 2 years, Joseph has been thinking that he's going to get out. But you know what? Sometimes folk get out and they forget all about you. Bible tells us that the chief cupbearer says to Pharaoh, I forgot. Because Pharaoh's been having these dreams. This is what you got to understand. Pharaoh's been having these dreams that nobody can interpret, nobody can articulate. And the cupbearer says, wait, I know a guy. Remember back when you had me in jail because you was mad at me? I met this dude, this Hebrew boy there, who interpreted dreams, and he interpreted them correctly. You got to ask him. Let somebody understand something. God knows where you are, and he will send for you when it's time. But you got to have patience. Because here's the problem. If you don't have patience, you will spend the entire time angry, and you won't be ready when God sends for you. When Pharaoh sends for Joseph, look what the Bible says. They brought him out, but he was like, let me change my clothes and wash myself up. I want you to understand. When you're going through and you're learning patience, stay ready. Write it down in the comments, stay ready. Joseph said, listen, I can't show up. Not right. But here's the thing. If you fall into resentment and bitterness, you're just going to show up talking about time. It's not about time. It's right on time. Joseph gets there. And this is what the Bible tells us. He gets there. Now, mind you, all of this started because Joseph was having dreams that people didn't like. Now, his ability to interpret dreams is what's bringing him out of prison. The Bible tells us that Pharaoh's been having these dreams, and these dreams about cows, fat cows at one time, and then skinny cows devouring the fat cows, then camel, fat ones and then skinny ones after that. And Joseph tells them, look, I'm going to tell you what's going on. You're going to have some years of plenty, and then you have some years of famine. In the years of plenty, you need to put some stuff aside so that you'll be ready for the impending years of famine. Find yourself a good dude, put him over that, everything will be all right. Pharaoh says, I done found a good dude, you. Understand? He's now learned humility. He's got integrity. He's been patient. Not only did Pharaoh elevate him out of prison, he made him second in command in all of Egypt. Some would use the word prime minister. He is the man now. But he couldn't get there without the prerequisites. Understand, it starts off with a dream of his family coming to him and his family being in his debt. And it ends, watch this, in Genesis 50, where we started off. Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended for good to accomplish everything that is now being done so that many lives could be saved. The same brothers who said we ain't bowing down to you, came and bowed down asking for his help. I want you to understand that when God is using your experiences, it's to grow you into the person who can handle what he's calling you to. Joseph couldn't handle success until he got some experience. And the experiences, he allowed them to make him better, not bitter. He was able to serve with humility now. He was able to act with integrity now. He was able to be patient with people. He found success, but only after he had gotten through the prerequisites. I want you to understand, you've gone through some stuff. Some of it hasn't been fair. Plenty of it you wish you hadn't had to deal with. But you've got to take the lesson from Joseph and see it in context. It was to make you better, not bitter. So in these times, understand God is up to something. In these times, understand that what God is preparing for you is greater than you can imagine. The more prerequisites, the bigger the job. Because here's the thing, God's not wasting your time. He's not wasting your pain. He's not wasting your experience. Romans chapter 8, verses 28 through 30. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed in the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he predestined, these he also called. Whom he called, he also justified. And who he justified, he's also glorified. My brothers and sisters, I want you to know, you got to know that it all works together. I told you, I'm going to give you context for it. And the context is, know that it's all coming together. Know that every problem that you've had, every valley you've been in, every pit you survived, every time you thought you were in prison, every time you were going through, God was not wasting your time. God was not wasting your pain. God was simply preparing you for where you were going, because it all works together. Every lesson was to prepare you for your destiny. What God predestined you for, he was conforming and forming you for. Your experiences, your pain, your problems, God saw all of them, and he's using them to make you better. So don't get bitter. For everything you've seen, everything you've experienced, everything you've gone through, God had a purpose in all of it. And the purpose was to make you better, not bitter. God kept you through these things. When you thought all was lost, God provided for you. When you thought you couldn't make it, God strengthened you. He did not do that for you to come out on the other side mad. He did it to make you better, not bitter. So now it's time that we get in shape, that we understand our spiritual gifts, that we get our hearts right, that we begin to use our God-given abilities for his purpose, that we turn our personalities so they can be used for God, and that we now examine our experiences so they can make us better, not bitter. I want you to understand, God has not brought you this far for you to be bitter and angry. God has brought you this far for you to be better for his purposes, better for his kingdom, better to serve, better to make a difference. God brought you through all this, kept you through all this. Jesus died on a cross for you and rose again for you to make you better, not bitter. So let's get in shape. Because with all that we've been through, God's given us gifts. He's cleaning our hearts. We've got abilities. We got to get our personalities right. And our experiences have brought us here, giving us the prerequisites for what he's calling us to. But now make sure that when you get there, you can handle success because you'll be better, not bitter. Thank you for joining us today. Listen, if that sermon moved your heart and you want to get a little bit closer to God, we're glad you're doing that. Listen, you're making a good choice right now. If you want to get saved, or if you want to join the church, or if you need special prayer, go to our website, www.stpauloxonhill.org, and under Contact Us, there'll be an option there for you. We want you to reach out to us so we can reach right back out to you. If you want to get saved, we'll pray the prayer of salvation with you. If you want to join the church, we'll talk to you about church membership. If you need special prayer, we'll pray directly with you. Just reach out to us and we'll reach right back out to you. Listen, we want you to be a part of the St. Paul family. Make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram. And make sure that you're liking and subscribing to us on YouTube. We want to make sure that you're getting our content every time we put it out. We believe that this will be a blessing to you and move you forward on your journey of faith. If you want to support our ministry, please go to our website, www.stpauloxonhill.org/give. Any amount you give will be a blessing to the ministry. If it's big, if it's small, or anywhere in between, make the best gift that God has put on your heart to help support us as we do God's kingdom work and are about God's kingdom business. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you back here next week. Now hang on for one more minute for the Williams Weekly Challenge. The Word of God tells us not only to be hearers of the Word, but also doers of the Word. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you took a moment to look back and reflect on your life? What you've got to always remember is that life is lived forward, but understood backwards. Too many times we look at where we are and we think it's unfair, we think it's not right, but we don't realize that God has been preparing us for this all along. And not only is he preparing us for where we are now, but where we are now is preparing us for where we will be later. This week, my challenge to you is real simple. Take a few minutes, look back at your life, see how far God has brought you so that you can understand where you are now and understand that where you are now is preparing you for where you will be later. So this week, take some time to reflect and see the hand of God. God bless you. I love you. We'll see you next time.